What's going on, my peoples? You are now tuned in to the thought of TRANE, and you're taking another trip down memory lane with me. Fourth quarter TRANE. Now, today's stop is going to land us at Black Moon's I Gotcha OPIN remix, released March 28th, 1994, and produced by the Beatminers. Now, when it comes to remixes, I've always been iffy about them. Either they're super garbage and never needed to have been made in the first place. Average, but I could have both did without it. Good enough to the point where it actually enhanced the original version. And then there was one like this one, where it was executed so well that it stood alone on its own, became its own song, set the tone and standard for how remixes need to be properly done, and completely changed the way that the creator of it started approaching all of their songs afterwards. That's how I Gotcha OPIN remixes viewed. But to understand the impact of this song, you had to first understand the impact and dynamic of Black Moon and Boot Camp Click itself. There's mainstream fan bases that's going to come and go based on your success or lack of. And then there's cult followings, which consists of a smaller, but more importantly, loyal and steady fan base that's going to ride with you thick and thin to the end. The Boot Camp Click had, and still has, that cult following. It's one of the deepest that hip-hop has ever seen. And if you don't believe me, then let me just briefly explain to you what I'm saying. I grew up in Baltimore City. Every city got a hood, and every hood has a section. The name of my section happens to go by the name of Emerson Village. In the village, there's a lot of things that could get you into a jam, but only a small amount of things that could get your ass out of one. If you found yourself walking down the wrong block and you got cornered in a dark alley, I'm just going to tell you now, your mama wasn't going to be able to save you. Your Sunday school teacher wasn't going to be able to save you. Pope John Paul himself wasn't going to be able to save you. But if you just so happen to have a Black Moon, a Smith & Wesson, a Helter Skelter, or an OGC cassette in your pocket, chances are you're probably going to make it back home that evening. Real talk. And the reason for that type of love for a crew like that, it wasn't necessarily for their beats, or their rhymes, or a slick-ass video or two. It was their relatability factor. You see, dudes from where I come from, where you come from, any hood in America, you can relate to how they sounded, how they looked, and how they came off. They wasn't the flashiest or the fanciest. When you see them on TV, or you heard them on record, they came off as dudes who just wanted to throw on some jeans, some dirty-ass construction Timbs, have a smoke cipher, a rap cipher, and mind their own damn business in the process. Never look to start shit with anybody. But if anybody started shit with them, they will fuck you up if need be. So to sum it all up, that's why so many people related to them. Because they came off as the average, everyday cat, stayed low-key, never tried to do too much, but was always down to get their hands dirty in the process if the situation called for it. On top of all that, they just so happened to be blessed with the production team that laid out the perfect landscape to match that description I just gave you of them. Speaking of that production team, there's a little fun fact behind the creation of the Black Moon name. The name itself was the brainchild of Mr. Walt, who would happen to be a big fan of the old school TV show Moonlight, which starred a young up-and-coming actor by the name of Bruce Willis. His character played a detective that worked for an agency called the Blue Moon Detective Agency. And of course, if you had to take a wild-ass guess, you would correctly figure out that Mr. Walt changed the Blue Moon to Black Moon. So before that name belonged to the group itself, it actually was the original name that Walt and Evil D went by as a production team. But then one day they started shopping for vinyl in a wet, dirty East New York basement. And as they stumbled across tons of priceless records to sample from, they was also greeted by dead rodent carcasses, dead rats, and dead mice floating around in the dirty basement water. A close associate that was rolling with him at the time looked at him and said, "Yo, y'all crazy as shit for walking around down here looking like coal miners. You know what? Matter of fact, that's y'all name now. Forget Black Moon. Y'all beat miners." So as the name beat miners stuck with them, they dropped the title of Black Moon. But the name was so damn dope, though, that they had to still put it to some kind of good use. And that's when it got handed down to Buckshot 5FT. And the rest is history. As for that history, a nice-sized chunk of it had began to be made with the release of Black Moon's heavily awaited debut LP, Into the Stage. Not only was that album a benchmark and launch pad for the entire legacy of the Boot Camp Clique, but it ended up being one of the most important albums of that era. We hear the stories all the time about how dominant the West Coast had become in hip-hop, until albums like Ready to Die, 36 Chambers, and Illmatic came along, single-handedly lifted the East Coast back into national relevancy. But the one album they always seem to forget about and don't mention nearly enough as it needs and deserves to be mentioned is Into the Stage. On any given documentary, interview, or podcast you run across these days that speaks on the golden eras of hip-hop, you'll hear them reference over and over again that classic New York boom bap sound. And whether you remember to mention them or not, subconsciously, a lot of the sounds that instantly replay in your head are courtesy of the beat miners and that signature Boot Camp Clique sound. That sound was in full bloom on Into the Stage, where Evil D and Mr. Walt meshed together some well-known samples along with some of the most obscure samples you could find in a wet, moldy-ass basement. Underneath all those, they apply some dusty-ass drums that historically hit so hard that it made the most hard-body carjacking and armed theft robbery experts crack a smile. Then head straight outside in the middle of a brick-ass cold New York City night to brush up on their craft. Once those elements were molded together, the end result was a perfect rock-solid foundation for Buckshot to cement his place as one of our culture's finest MCs ever. Now, this was an album that from the time it was released all the way up to this very day that I play from top to bottom. And out of all those countless classic joints that resides on this timeless piece of work, the one that I love the most isn't even on this project at all. Of course, I Got You Open, the original version, is, and it's a very dope song in its own right. So dope that Eminem remade it for his Marshall Mathers LP Part 2 album. But for me, the remix embodied a certain essence to it that the original hadn't fully manifested into yet. Yeah, I feel the eye rolls and cold stares already. So let me just go ahead and explain what I mean. The beginning stages of this album began in 1992. So in between that time and 1994, you can easily hear the changes in Buckshot's voice and the progressions of his flow. There's points on the album where you'll hear him spitting at a higher pitch, aggressive tone, and then you'll noticeably hear later on in the recording process where his voice begins to calm down and smooth out more over the track. I brought up his voice because that's what you can hear him trying to find throughout the makings of Enter the Stage. And it's what every great lyricist searches to find at the start of their career. The shaping and molding of that process was a classic adventure for the listeners, no matter what the case may have been. But for me, the fine-tuned and chiseled version of Buckshot arrived on my TV screen one afternoon while watching Rap City, with a high-ass amount of undone homework posted up right on the side. The scene was a dark playground. The sound was a sample of Playing Your Game, Baby, by the iconic Barry White. And the man who emerged from that darkness was about to deliver the best performance of his career and one of the greatest hip-hop creations ever laid. I woke up in the morning, hopped on the train and saw my man, he had an L in his hand. Hide it from the beast, I needs to catch a buzz before I hit my block. I take a mega hit from the on the good ship, lollipop, move the hop, so I can put the hip in the grip. Everybody slip so I can take a trip to the dip, dig a deeper hole, microphone control with soul. Look at my hot eyes and tell me, how could you be cold? Now, I had to pause just to let you know that right there, my friends, is what we call hitting pockets. And on this one, he was hitting them pockets at ease and with the best of them. He wasn't trying to do nothing else here but simply do what this smooth-ass melodic sample was hypnotizing him to do. And that was to lay back, close his eyes, get lost in a cloud of smoke, and then completely float on his beat to utter perfection from start to finish. Speaking of clouds of smoke, that was the first time in the history of ganja smoking that I had ever heard anyone refer to a blunt as a on the good ship lollipop. As a former connoisseur of chocolate tie bags, I felt that particular bar deep in my soul. I'm coming to you from the underground with thunder sound. Number one question, yo, how can I be down? Well, I tell you, bring your lighter and roll your finger. Back up on the lighter so you see the fire singer. Move from left to right, then front to back. Herbal verbal letters give the mic contact. React whenever I keep the head scoping. Don't front, you know I got you open. Again, it's just more the same. He's riding the beat effortlessly to the point where it feels like he didn't even make lyrics for this at all. Sometimes a track be hitting so damn good that as an MC, you stop thinking so hard and just allow the sounds to write and construct the flows for you. You know, like some cruise control shit. New school rappers, don't try this at home. But then again, maybe y'all need to. But back to the lecture at hand. The end of that first verse transitions into one of the most infectious hooks your earlobe has ever fell in love with. Don't front, you know I got you open. It's the original heads meeting the original crooks. Duck down, don't front, you know I got you open. Check my dialect from my diaphragm, my man. Duck down, don't front, you know I got you open. It's the original heads meeting the original crooks. Duck down, don't front, you know I got you open. Check the dialect from my diaphragm, my man. There's nothing overthought. There's nothing overwritten. And there's nothing fancy here. It's a hook. And what is a hook made to do? The same purpose it serves on a fishing rod It's the same exact purpose it serves in the recording booth. It's meant to throw you out something catchy and then reel your ass in. And once we got reeled in, we've all been in the same boat for damn near the last 30 years. As recognizing that hook and the song attached to it is one of the defining pieces of work of our illustrious golden era. But before we drift off from the dock, let's instead stay afloat and continue with the well-deserved flowers and praises of I Got You Open. I be dedicated to the moon 'cause it's black, resurrect, come back. Tell me about the other side, Jack. Now we going back to who got the props when I blew up the spot last year on the box. The pressure to come back with another fat single. Not too underground to make it stop when you mingle. See, those aren't just bars right. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that's how him and the other group members were feeling at the time. You see, nowadays, morals to an artist, it's a thing of the past. But back in the past, morals, balls, and your word were the only thing a true hip-hop artist had to stand on. When the label was pressuring you to drop another single to match the success of your first one, you lost sleep over that shit because you want to match the success of your last hit, all while not losing integrity and your real fans in the process. So when Buckshot mentions dropping another joint that's not too underground to make you stop when you mingle, in a nutshell, he's pretty much saying, we gonna drop some shit y'all can jam to, like Who Got the Props. But we not gonna stray away from our original formula in the process. With Got Your Open Remix, they went beyond Call of Duty on that and gained more of a cult following right along with it. Today, that's a lost art. Back then, it was the only art. You can fool the rest, but you can't fool me. See, the best school me. For the simple fact, it's the G-O-D. Buck to the shot, still to the tech, then buck to the rock. So forget the past, no more shorty. Strictly Buckshot, I rock you one down to 40 below. I got to let them know that the elevator levels higher every time I felt the fire. All of us original, day one Black Moon heads, who were religiously calling him Buckshot Shorty at the time, had abruptly been put on notice and invited to the funeral of that nickname after the line in that third verse that firmly told us to forget the past, no more shorty. Sad moment for us indeed. But what coincides with every death is a new birth. So when he say it's the G-O-D, buck to the shot, steel to the tack, and ruck to the rock, unbeknownst to us, we were being introduced to the next two members of the boot camp, which were Smith & Wesson and Helter Skelter. With that being said, just so many iconic moments that evolved from this remix. The replayability factor was through the roof, and it instantly became revered as an underground classic. As for that replay value I just spoke of, there was no late night hip hop radio show that whole entire summer where this shit wasn't played at least multiple times in the evening. If you turned on the video jukebox, it was already on and being requested to play again 5 to 10 more times in a row. If you turned on Yo MTV Raps, it was on, and most likely accompanied by a dope-ass Black Moon interview with Dr. Dre and Ed Lover. And one particular moment that I recall very well when remembering this song is every Saturday morning, Rap City will have a 2-hour top 10 countdown show that consisted of the most requested joints that came on that past week. I Got Your Open Remix was number one so many weeks in a row that they almost had to retire the video just so the other videos could have a shot at the #1 spot. Yes, the 1990s, especially the flawless middle part of the 1990s. Good goddamn times indeed. Those accolades and memories I just took a time machine back to are just a few, and only partially gives justice to one of the songs, groups, and movements that branded that particular section of the 90s as such an influential, game-changing era. These days, you can turn on those late-night hip-hop shows. Well, the few real ones that's left anyway. And you'll still hear that same smooth Crooklyn voice, and even smoother Barry White sample in heavy rotation, as if it dropped last night on Tidal, Apple, and Spotify. Any hip-hop list today that debates the top remixes ever made, it still remains one of the very few that requires no debate at all. Long story short, all Nazi-head boys are still realizing what the best of the best and the cream of the crop is. And somewhere deep in the East New York basement, you can smell a cloud of smoky lie, and you can faintly hear a voice from a general who's ducked down in a staircase saying, I know the plan, so I keep 'em scoping. Don't front, you know I got you open.